Millions of Americans are going to have their credit score drops by the hundreds of points. How do I know that? Well, let's look into some data. And it has to do with student loans. So this was just posted. And student loan serious delinquencies are skyrocketing. 8% of student loans transition into serious delinquencies in Q1 of 2025, the highest rate since 2020. This is up from 0.8% in Q4 of 2024 as the student loan relief period expired and delinquency started to show up on credit reports. 11% of borrowers age 50 plus were at least 90 days past due, the second highest in 20 years. Over 10% of balances over 6 million borrowers are either past due or in default. Additionally, among Americans required to make payments, 24 were behind on their student loans in Q1 2025, higher than 22% in Q1 of 2020, where COVID started. So here we see the graph transition into serious delinquencies plus 90 plus for student loans by age. And you see that skyrocketing because before they were not enforcing it. So they were like, hey, you do you. And this is on Reddit. Whenever I talk and I say, hey, this is what we're seeing in the market, it doesn't get more real than YouTube and Reddit, because in Reddit, we have advising 467. So you don't know who that is. So these people don't use their name. They don't use their persona. They'll just post raw content, how they're feeling, how they're doing. Help, my credit, this was 3 days ago. Help, my credit score dropped from 760 to 553, delinquent on 8 student loans. Sub comment. This happened to me. I had 7 loans go delinquent and my credit score dropped from 740 to 511. So you kind of see the percentages, how much it drops. And here we go. Federal student loans are due again. A record percentage of borrowers are in serious delinquent. Over 9 million student loan borrowers past due after bills restarted, Fed estimates. So what do you use like your credit score for? What is it used for? And why do you need to care about that? So first of all, when you're looking at student loans and your credit score is going to drop, you're going to have a harder time getting loans approval if you want to buy a house, mortgages, cars, anything like that is going to be impacted if your credit score drops. So it's going to make it more expensive for you to borrow money because they think that you can't pay it back because you didn't pay back student loans. They're going to assume, and it's just an algorithm that's going to say, if you're not paying this back, the likelihood of you not paying other stuff back is higher. So we're going to start dinging you. Car insurance. What I did not know that auto insurers are saying that, hey, car insurance company may use credit scores to determine premiums. Other insurance with less common, some insurance companies may also consider credit scores when assuming risks. Kind of crazy when you think about it, right? Utilities. Some utilities companies use credit scores to determine to offer services. Employment. While less common, some employers may request credit scores as part of the hiring process. So this is kind of creepy, right? So if you have a low credit score, and then they're going to say, we might not want to work with you, or you might not get hired here. So you see how this kind of comes back and bites you. Here we go. Credit card applications, approval, credit lines, interest rates, tenant screening, rental approval. And it's just going to be really bad when you're looking at all these kind of things that have to do with it just because you did a bad deal. And what I'm talking about a bad deal is when you went to college and you're like, hey, this is supposed to slingshot me into my future. This is supposed to gonna make me retire. This is gonna provide a better life for my family. And all of a sudden, you're like, hold on, not so fast. We're in bigger trouble because you got into a deal that isn't good. And so we've seen now multiple lawsuits, and I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, my university got sued because they said they false advertised. And this is not the first instances where they falsely advertised. Here, this was just a little while ago that they said, hey, feds fined Baker College $2.5 million for deceiving marketing theft students with debt and regrets. So you see, and there's other ones, I have it on the screen right here, that they said, hey, you can make this much coming out of your university, out of our program, and doing all that. They went in, they paid, they got their they paid their share, they got the education. Now they're coming out and they don't make that money that they were promised, and they're starting to say like, oh, the market doesn't require these skills, and if they do, at a way lesser rate than I initially expected. So this is something that I can kind of speak on, because when I've met Allie and I lived in Florida, I moved to California and she had 60 plus $1,000 in student loans. And we just got married and she told me about that beforehand. And so I knew going into this that, hey, this is going to be my burden too. And I didn't say, hey, let's just keep this separate. Let's just keep the finances separate. I said, no, when I'm going to get married, we're going to share everything and do that. And so then I also looked at, hey, let's kind of get a prenup or something else. And because she's like, I want to protect, had some stock options and something else. And as I had investments also. And so then we went to an attorney, and that attorney actually told me that if you're not willing to spend a few $1,000s on a prenup, you're not in a position where you should get one. So I was like, okay. So then I said, that's fine. Let's just combine everything. And what we've then done is I moved out to California, and all of a sudden we're like, where do we want to live? And I thought, first idea was like, let's get a nice apartment in the Bay Area and kind of live like that. But then we wouldn't have any money left over to pay down those student loans. And so upon further looking, she paid on those student loans, I think 3 years, and they went down not even $100. They actually increased. So she took out like 50, I think after she was done, I think she took out like 58 or something. And then when we met and talked about it, was over 60. So she was making like $500-600 payments every month, and those payments just went towards interest, and it didn't even tackle any principal. So, and it wasn't even enough to tackle all the interest. So even though that she made $500-600 payments, it just constantly increased by a few dollars, and then those few dollars accrued some more interest, and so that's how people get in trouble. So what we did is, and people, this is a super unpopular opinion, right? So we moved in with somebody else and we just rented a room. This is not what people should do when they're married and they want to start off their life. But when you have that much debt, what are you going to do? So we moved into a friend's house and we rented a room for $1,000 a month. And what we did is we lived way, way below our means. We drove cars that were like $9,000 at CarMax when we met. We sold 2 cars, so we just have one, so we can start tackling this. So I sold my, I had an Xterra, nice SUV, so I sold that one. She sold her Honda, and we got like a little C-Max that got like 40 plus miles per gallon, and all we did was just tackle that. Every single penny we had over that, we're starting to tackle it. So we're starting to make thousands of dollars of extra payments every month. And after 1 year, they were paid off. And, or a little bit, maybe a little bit longer. I can't remember how exactly, but it took us about a year or something. But we didn't go on vacation. We didn't really go out eating fancy. We didn't party. The maximum that we did was we went to Tahoe and rented a cabin for 2 days, and it was during like off season, not even peak, and it was like $300-400. Everything else went back into student loans. And so what this is, that what I'm trying to tell you is that you can do it if you have a job. You just have to make sure that, first of all, that this is a degree that can pay at the end of the day. Second of all is that, hey, just because I got a good paying job now, it is now time to keep living like a college student and keep paying that back. And if you got to move to get a high paying job, you just have to do it. And you don't need the nicest apartment when you're starting off. You don't need the fancy car, the BMW. No, you go and you get something that is inexpensive that can get you from point A to point B, and you'll make cuts. We didn't go to Starbucks. We didn't really do anything besides going to Costco, buying food, meal prepping, and then just doing that. And we didn't get steaks. We just lived below our means. But short-term pain for long-term gain. So I know that there's a bunch of people that are saying, oh, I didn't have that opportunity. I didn't have that. And now it's even more important that you come out, if you're in your 50s and have student loans, to come out and say, hey, this was my experience, and either you got duped into it, you weren't clearly explained the consequences, or you just didn't know about it. And whenever I make these videos, it's so important that other people comment and share their stories, because if you're watching this video and you think about, hey, I'm about to go to college, is this the right track? And then you have to think about, hey, is this going to be financially good for me? Is this going to be what I want to do, spending the rest of my life paying off? Because it's not going to go away, and you can't bankrupt them. You can't do something like that. So you're signing up for a commitment. It's it's like when you have kids, once they're 18, they kind of can do their own stuff. Student loans will be with you till you die if you don't pay them off. So you gotta, or they get forgiven, but the chances of that and the likelihood is very, very small, especially where we're heading. So now you got to ask yourself, hey, is this going to be beneficial to me, or is my 10-year down the future me going to thank me for the decision I've made today? And if the answer is yes, then you should go to college, and you should take on that burden. You should take on that debt. But if the 10-year down the road you is saying this is not going to be a good idea, then don't do it. There's great programs where you can make $70,000-$80,000 a year welding, being an electrician, being a mechanic, doing all kinds of stuff, that make pretty decent money, where you don't need to go in debt with hundreds of thousands of dollars because you were duped into it. And when I grew up, they always told me, like, that's how it was in Switzerland. Hey, you got to go to college. If you're not going to go to college, you're not going to be anybody. You're going to be a loser. You're going to be cleaning the streets, and you're going to be street sweeper. That's what my professor told. Like my my what was it? My teacher told me once. He said, I don't think you're cut out for university. I don't think you're even cut out for school. But Switzerland always needs street sweepers also. So that might be in your future. And I was like, wow. And when you hear that, like when you hear stuff like that, it just kind of tells you, like, hey, these teachers should, first of all, not be teachers now that I know. And second of all, it's just not a good setup when you're going into 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, $150,000 in debt when you're going to be making 60 or 50 coming out. So you got to know what you're signing. You need to read the fine print. You need to know that, hey, this degree, there's an abundance on jobs. You need to see, hey, is this with AI going to grow this industry, or is it going to contract, right? Because if you're going to look at it now and say, hey, my industry is going to be contracting because AI is going to take jobs, then it might not be worth going into this super prestigious university and taking out $200,000-$300,000 in student loans when you can do something else that's going to pay comparably similar, and you have a lot of possibilities afterwards. And people say, oh, I don't want to be a plumber. It's brutally hard on my joints. It's brutally hard on my knees. But you do that, you'll learn your ropes, you become, you then be in business for yourself. You can do it on the side. There's so many opportunities for you to make money elsewhere like that. So college isn't all end be all. And it used to be, you can even read online that trade schools can now advertise in high schools. And before it was like, no, we don't want to do the trade schools have come to high schools. It's only colleges that have that. And now we're starting to see, like, hey, there's a need for plumbers. There's a need for welders. There's stuff that we just need in society that hasn't had a good reputation. And all of a sudden we're trying to see, hey, this is a good reputation. So I'm just trying to set some light on it and see where you guys are at. Let me know what you guys think about this. I know some of you guys have been doing trades. Some of you guys even switched from software to the trades, and you've never been happier. And yeah, let me know the stories. Share your stories. And look at that, found some money. So yeah, not bad, not bad. And yeah, share your stories. Share what your experience was like, if you would do it again, if you have student loans. So let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.